Hi, and welcome back to another edition of Talking Cars. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Alex and Isaac.
I'm Emily Thomas.
And I have the privilege of introducing a car that we're going to talk about today. It's the redesigned 2023 Honda Accord. And the reason I'm saying it's a privilege is that this is an enduring legacy among cars. Always among the best performing midsize family sedans, certainly in Consumer Reports tests, as well as you ask any other automotive journalist, they're probably going to tell you the same. And we bought an EX version, which comes with 192 horsepower, 1.5 liter four-cylinder turbo engine hooked up to a continuously variable transmission. The EPA estimates peg this powertrain at 32 miles per gallon overall. Standard equipment includes heated front seats, 17-inch wheels, and adaptive cruise control. Standard safety gear includes forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, blind spot warning, and lane centering assistance. With destination, the bottom line came to $30,705. So with that grandiose introduction, I'm going to turn to you, Alex, and ask you, what is missing in this version of the Accord?
Honestly, not that much. So to be honest, it's not a flashy vehicle. It's not perfect, but I think it has most of the basics, and it has a lot of the safety tech that you just mentioned. Drives pretty well. I just think it gets the job done pretty well. And like I said, it's not necessarily perfect, but it's got simple controls. It's got CarPlay. You know, maybe it's not wireless in this version that we got, but it's spacious. It's efficient. So I think it just does a lot of things pretty darn well, as you kind of alluded to in your intro there. But what is a little weird is that they are kind of structuring the trim levels a little bit differently, right? So you can only get the higher trims as a hybrid. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but it is a little strange in the way that they package some of the items, right? So our EX version, which is the higher of the two gas-only versions.
Non-hybrid, right?
Non-hybrids, right? Just to put it in perspective, it has heated seats, but the next higher version of the hybrid, or the lowest hybrid, but the next higher version in the lineup, right? Of like the 5 versions.
That's as clear as mud.
Yeah, right. I'm doing a great job here. That one has a larger infotainment system and a leather-wrapped wheel, but it does not have heated seats. So it's just kind of weird if you want to get certain features, and Honda doesn't really let you pick things.
Right. Everything is baked into your option or into your trim line.
Into the trim, exactly. Right. So you kind of just have to pick and choose which one is most applicable to you, right?
It ultimately feels like no matter what trim you choose, you're likely making a compromise somewhere because of the fact that you can't add the additional options that you might want.
Right.
And that they don't build on top of each other. So like you just said, you would think that if the EX has the heated seats, that would carry over to the next trim.
Correct.
But that doesn't.
Linear.
Right, but that's not the case here. So it's important to know.
Yeah, agreed. So you might end up spending for a higher trim than you really want to just to get something that's important to you. Also interesting is that with this redesign, there's no 2-liter turbocharged engine anymore, right? So the Accord has kind of always been this like sleeper,
right?
In my opinion, so you could kind of
the hot version,
but understated, right? So like it looks like an Accord, but it has a pretty strong engine in it, and all these things. You used to be able to get it with a manual transmission, so those things are gone. So now it's just the hybrid, which is a nice hybrid, or this version with the 1.5 turbo and 192 horsepower, which again totally gets the job done. But you just don't have that kind of sportier option available.
And unlike some competing models like the Nissan Altima, the Subaru Legacy, Toyota Camry, it's front wheel drive only. The Accord is not doing all wheel drive. I guess they're saying go to CRV or
save that money and buy some snow tires.
Right, exactly. Which is fine. I'm not necessarily advocating all-wheel drive all the time, as we've talked about many times in this podcast. It's all about the tires. That being said, Emily, considering all the content that's in this, would you consider this a decent family car?
I think so. I know that for most people, they're thinking about car seats and stuff, but you also kind of need to think about if you have a family, as your children are growing and kind of moving through the various car seat stages and into using the vehicle seatbelt by itself, is this going to be a good fit for your family? Is this the type of car that gives them the safety features that will help them not just when they're young, but also as they grow up and they are really now relying on the vehicle systems? And I would say that this car does do that. Really, this is the type of car that will serve your family for many years and many stages of life.
And with that in mind, there's enough room in the back seat to take on the various sizes of child safety seats.
Absolutely. I'm always impressed by how spacious the interior cabin is for an Accord, right? Like you see the outside of the vehicle and you're like, it's still a sedan. So like, I'm probably not going to have that much room to myself, right? Or to anybody else. But you get in there and there's so much room.
Especially
in that
leg room.
Yeah, in that rear seat.
Yeah.
The cargo space is incredible. You can still fit so many things back there. You could put like a full-size stroller plus more things.
Yeah, the cargo space is not only just a big volume, but the trunk is edge to edge, right? Like you have really thin walls on the side and the opening just goes right to the edge. So it's super easy to just get stuff in and out.
Right. So I think that really, for the family that's maybe not wanting to make the transition to an SUV yet, or, they wanting to stay in the sedan group for whatever their reasons are, this is a great fit and they will find what they need.
But one other thing Honda is doing well, which kind of ties into this subject a little bit, is this is the first car from Honda where automatic collision notification and SOS are free and also modem based. So that means that there's basically a cell phone chip built into the car, right, that can dial back to 911 or Honda's emergency services center in the event of an accident if the airbags go off. So previously you had to pay for this system from Honda, or some of their lower end systems had a version that would use your Bluetooth phone that you have paired to it, right? And so this is kind of a step in the right direction, right? It's free and it's also a more robust technology than relying on your phone. So hopefully
and
we see
something that should have been in place.
Well, I was going to say that this is something that Consumer Reports are big advocates
for a long time, and we're starting to see the tables turn a little bit and go away from everybody requiring a paid subscription after the fact to some of these more free systems. So Honda's kind of the latest one to move in that direction. So hopefully we see that on more models.
So there's some more good news there. But as you mentioned, Alex, when it comes down to driving it, are you going to be grabbing these keys after when we're done testing so you could just take it home for a little spin?
I mean, I think this is a good reminder that a straightforward car in a sedan can be pretty attractive just from owning it and its simplicity, but also driving it, right? I mean, amongst a world of SUVs, I do think it's still an attractive option. And there are, believe it or not, some people that want sedans out there. They still exist.
One over here.
So because it's quite low and the center of gravity is pretty low, and it's also very light compared to a lot of cars that we have now, especially in this kind of size category, it's got pretty good handling, good braking. It's not going to blow you away necessarily, but like the steering is pretty responsive, feels pretty natural. So it's very easy to drive, and maybe it's not as engaging as the Civic that we recently tested, right? Those are pretty sharp as far as cars like that go, but still, I think it does really well. It's kind of noisy. Hondas tend to be, and this one, they're getting better in some ways, but particularly in the back seat. It's
it
loud.
was still, the hybrid version, which we also have, is better. It was still too noisy for me. And so when I got into this, I was like, okay, this is even more. And especially when you're getting onto the highway and you're accelerating, you really hear that. And it's just the insulation is not as much as it could be. And so I was getting a lot of the road noise and
you get a lot of the engine noise too. It's got the CVT, right? That when you really need to use all that power, that the RPMs
you're
raise really high.
on the highway.
Yeah.
The powertrain is going to tell you it's working pretty hard.
Yes.
Right. And there's some compromises here, right? Like had they gone and just insulated the whole car and made it super quiet, maybe I wouldn't have just said that about how it's light and handles really well, because it would have been heavier and more expensive.
You're adding more insulation. You might be decreasing your fuel economy. There's a compromise one way or another.
Right. You talked about it being low to the ground, which, helps it in some of those areas as a pro. But for us also, when we were using it, my husband had knee surgery last fall, and getting in and out of the Accord was hard for him.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
It still put a strain on it. And I know he's going to give me a hard time because usually we talk about that with like, if you have like, you're trying to put your parents in or like somebody that's like elderly, right? You're worried about the access and you're worried about how low to the ground it is.
SUVs really help.
I've had two knee surgeries and, dug down and stuff like that. I will say that we've also recently tested a Subaru BRZ. We're in the midst of testing a Nissan Z car. Those are very low to the ground sports cars, much more challenging to get in and out of. But I can see where you're coming from by saying the Accord is a little bit lower, certainly, than a lot of the SUVs that we're used to driving.
Right, or even your like crossovers, right? Just a mild step up. So that's another thing to consider. Like it helps with the things that you're talking about, like the handling, et cetera. But for that livability, that day in and day out, those are things you need to consider.
Oh, yes. And speaking of livability, and I'm a big advocate on simple controls. The the Accord, we know.
It's on my bingo card for
I'll
the logbook.
hop in that camp too.
Okay,
sure.
Because it is the simple things: adjusting the climate system, adjusting the radio, and the Accord is one of the real role models for all car companies of how to do it pretty easily. I mean, it might take you 30 seconds to learn how to operate this car. If your neighbor's going to borrow your car, you're not going to have to stand over them saying, "Okay, this is how you do this. This is how you do this."
Right.
It is very, very straightforward. And,
you got the big knobs for all the climate stuff, right? The infotainment system is just incredibly simple by today's standards, right?
I went from like the CRV into the Accord, and I was like, "Oh, perfect! It's like exactly the same."
Exactly. We're really glad every time a manufacturer redesigns a car that we've had a lot of experience with. For me, I'm always like holding my breath. Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Certainly in terms of the controls, because a lot of the wave, the new wave, the current trend for EVs certainly is to make them as complicated as possible.
Right. I'm a big believer in like the things that are required for you to do for like the basic operation of the vehicle should be incredibly simple and intuitive.
Because this is also a safety issue.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you are paying attention to the controls, if you really have to focus on the little slider on the steering wheel to increase or decrease the volume, you're not focusing on your driving.
Everybody thinks they're better at multitasking than they actually are. But
agreed.
I will say about this car, for anybody interested, a lot of times the way this works is you step into the higher trims and you get the bigger infotainment system. It's more colorful and it's more feature rich and flashy and all these things, and it gets worse a lot of times because of that. It's not really true with the Accord. If this one and the smaller 7-inch system it is, and this EX is great, but if you step up to the hybrid and you get this larger infotainment system that comes with it, it's also really, really good.
That's
it's
good
got
news.
Big icons and text. It's easy to see and read, and it just kind of takes what's good about the one in this car and expands on it a little bit, but in the right ways. So don't be as scared if you want to step up to the hybrid and you see, oh no, it's got like the bigger infotainment. It's gonna be hard to use. It's not. And you're absolutely right. That often happens when you go higher in the trim lines. And we talked about all the room inside. The driving position is also ideal. The visibility, another thing that I'm huge on, is fantastic. What did you say? As far as sedans go, really thin pillars, big windows. They didn't do this crazy styling to make the belt line of the car where the metal meets the window, do all these crazy things. So, just really straightforward and better for it.
Really, one of the best.
You're one of our tall driver assessors, and I'm closer to our short driver assessor.
So what did you find it also?
So I also found it pretty easy to see and to get that good driving position. So that's a pretty good gauge that really for most people, you should be able to drive comfortably, right? Well, comfortably in terms of your visibility and position.
Right.
Maybe
we're gonna get to that.
I can see Quince twitching. Like, what? She said it's comfortable?
The smoke's gonna come out of my ear. Trust me.
All right,
but in terms of legacy, for many years, Consumer Reports has done stories on the best cars for tall drivers, the best car for shorter drivers, and the Accord has been on both lists. So you're absolutely on the money there, comparing
that's,
a taller driver and a shorter
solid design.
driver, and it works for everyone.
Yeah.
So yes, let's get into the not so good, and we're talking about seats here.
Getting fired up.
Well, this was the most disappointing part of this car.
It's too bad.
because the guts are good. The chassis, the steering, the engine, the fuel economy. I just want to drive this car for hours. Except the seat is such a bummer.
Yeah, it won't let you do it.
No. No, I mean, many of our drivers complained of an ailment. This is a very high tech. This is a technical term. It's called numb butt. Okay, it just
like
means
my 5-year-old.
well, the cushion support isn't there.
Yeah.
There's something that's in the seat of this chair that you're sitting
Very
in.
like thin padding, and
Yeah,
just the shaping of it kind of feels like you're sitting in a hole.
It's
a
almost
little
like somewhere in the assembly line they didn't put the stuff in that they need to make the seat comfortable. It's so
missed the
bizarre.
bit. Yeah.
And that was so that to me, you can't go road tripping or enjoy a good drive if the seat is just killing you. Now on to the Accord's fit and finish. Don't know about you guys. I was not dazzled by it. It was kind of inconsistent. There's little features like the honeycomb grating and mid dash around the vents
knobs
are very nice. The knobs have nice detents to it. But Alex, as you alluded to, the steering wheel is just plain plastic.
Yeah,
which is
too bad.
such a bummer.
Right? It's the one thing, not the one thing, but one of the few things that you touch
You're
the
always,
entire time.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because there's no self-driving car, and this isn't one of them either. So you are, in fact, touching the steering wheel the entire time. So
it just seems like if you're your Honda, you're gonna be cost cutting. That's an unfortunate place
Right.
to find
They
ways
trimmed
to
the budget on the wrong
to save
group.
money.
Maybe not the
Right.
honeycomb vents. Maybe the wrap steering.
Right. And you talked about how much room is in the trunk, but the fit and finish of the trunk is just abysmal. You've got all this exposed wires and hardware. It's totally unfinished.
I'll take that, but I do agree that the steering wheel,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Just, you gotta
You
draw the
don't
line
see the
somewhere.
trunk as much,
Yeah,
but you
right.
are looking at the steering wheel all the time.
Right. Well,
Yep.
hey,
And holding
we're
it.
Consumer Reports. We look at everything.
Well, of course.
You can't hide from
the
us.
average person isn't sitting there staring at their trunk all day long, but they are going to be inside the car holding that steering wheel.
Right, right.
And we talked about the noise, and that kind of brings up an interesting comparison to the hybrid model. And loyal viewers and listeners of Talking Cars know that Emily and I were talking about the Accord hybrid a while back, and we found a clear distinction between the regular Accord noise levels and the hybrid, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the hybrid, it's quieter just because you do get to take advantage of kind of some EV only driving or some electric only propulsion, usually lower speeds and things like that. But even still, the engine itself, it's a different engine paired with the electric motor is, and in my experience, a little bit more cultured sounding, it's quieter, smoother. And then it's not a transmission per se, but the 2-motor hybrid system kind of tries to simulate some shifts, so you get some change in the RPM from the engine and these things.
And a little power boost.
Yeah, definitely compared to the
regular
one, yes. And you feel it off the line, even if the numbers are pretty similar. It just from a driving perspective feels a little bit more, like it has more power on the low end.
I feel like for me, that's one of the main things that I can see as being different. Like that's what's most noticeable for me between like the gas versions of the cars that are coming out and their hybrid counterparts, right?
Right.
Is that you get much better initial power delivery.
Oh, yeah.
And because I hate when I'm like, I really need to merge in and okay, the car's not there yet, right? And you overcome that a lot of times with the hybrid version. And then of course, because I am very sensitive to noise in my cabin, the hybrids are usually quieter.
Right.
So for me, that's usually what would be the thing that makes me be like, oh, should I stick with these 2 lower trim levels that are the gas version for the Accord, or should I bump up to the hybrid? And that would be the deal breakers for me.
And as you alluded to, you do bump up in price by getting the hybrid. The trim line sort of looks like the Accord EX is the top of the non-hybrid version, and then you go to the hybrid Sport, which is, I guess you'd call it the entry level hybrid model. But so you're paying a little bit more to get the hybrid in this next trim line.
You are,
but you're getting the same seat.
Same seat.
And that's
better
unfortunate.
steering wheel, though.
That better steering wheel. I'll give you that.
But no heated seats.
But no heated seats. It's so strange.
Yeah, and the bigger infotainment. It does handle actually a little bit better than the regular EX. It's got like thicker sway bars, and I think they changed around the suspension, the spring rates and stuff a little bit. Some of that's to compensate for the weight.
A little heavier, right?
But exactly.
Right.
It's a little heavier, but it's got bigger wheels and tires. So I would say you wouldn't really notice it too much on the street if you're just kind of like an average driver. But if you do start to pick up the pace a little bit or turn a little bit more aggressively, I'll say, you might notice it.
How do you drive, Alex?
Well, we have a track. So.
Yeah, we have a track. We have a 327-acre test facility. Let's get that.
So there is some difference there, but I wouldn't necessarily say, just strive for that hybrid sport model because of that. But it is a nice little bonus.
And unfortunately, we don't have any experience with the higher end Accords right now with the leather seats. I guess the good Consumer Reports advice that we can give out right now, if you're interested in this, is see if you can get into the higher trims. See if the seats are any different. Sometimes a leather seat can make a difference in terms of it is more supportive, or you might get more adjustments.
Right.
So I would definitely check out the higher trims, which means you're going to get a hybrid powertrain. But in my opinion, that's not a bad thing
Definitely
at all
not.
in this situation.
Nope.
So hopefully Honda will maybe come around and do something more on the seats for even, the more basic models. And hey, check out, the podcast where Emily and I are talking about the Accord Hybrid if you want more information. We're going to be reporting our final tests soon. But in the meantime, check out our first drive on consumerreports.org. Which brings us to our audience question. We love your questions, text, videos, send them all. talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. And this week we have a question from Mark from Connecticut, which is where we are right now. Mark writes, I think there are only two factors lifting up SUVs in the market: road conditions and driver training. Public roads are bad, and everyone drives trucks and crossovers anyway. And if you pop a tire in a lower riding vehicle, well, it's kind of your fault. Also, drivers no longer pay attention behind the wheel and are driving way too fast. So people think they need a vehicle with a higher ride heights to be protected from these hazards. But if drivers were better educated and more competent, I think the population would quickly shift back to sedans, wagons, and coupes, as it should be. That's a little my emphasis on that one. So what he's saying, what are your thoughts on my theory? So are SUVs and pickup trucks taking over the world?
I mean, yeah, in some ways they are. I'm not totally sure that I'm on board with all of the theories here in Mark's comment, although I do appreciate the kind of deeper level of thinking here into why maybe some of this is happening. And I totally get the comment about the roads, but two things come to mind. First of all, roads vary widely depending on where you are in the country.
Correct.
So,
Right.
in my experience, not that I'm a world traveler by any means, but if you go to some nicer or areas with nicer roads in this country, I still see SUVs and trucks anyway.
Right.
So I'm not totally convinced that, that's the reason or a reason that people are choosing these. I'm not really sure people really equate potholes to off-roading and then think SUV. Like, I'm not sure that's the thought process necessarily. And then I will also say that to the comment about popping tires, go out in our garage right now and look at how many SUVs and crossovers have 20-inch wheels with
Right, you
low-profile
can still
tires.
pop a tire in a
100%.
truck tire.
And they often have
I feel like
stiffer,
most of the times when I've gotten flats, it's been our SUVs.
Right.
and they have stiffer suspension than the cars anyway to keep them a little more stable and from
Right. And
tipping over.
we're talking, trucks, SUVs, crossovers. A lot of crossovers are very sporty. They're based on cars anyway.
Right.
So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. But I mean, Emily, are these SUVs, pickup trucks, everything, is it like a nuisance for the road? I mean,
I don't know if it's a nuisance or not. I mean, so there's a few different things that come into play. Like, I agree with him that yes, there is a shift, right? And we see that even in like what the manufacturers are providing, which is in response to how consumers
Yes.
have been using their buying power, right?
The market.
Right. Consumers are buying more SUVs and pickups. And so now the manufacturers are like phasing out their sedan lines.
And there's incentives for them to do that as well, just because these larger, more expensive vehicles with more options make more money.
That's
Right.
true.
Absolutely. So there's that side of it. I don't know if all of his reasons are the reasons why I would think that we've made this shift. I think there's more cultural reasons for it, like lifestyle changes. People are traveling more in general, right? So they're requiring their vehicles to do more things. Like, I don't have the numbers, but I know that the vehicle, like the number of miles traveled on the road, right, in the US compared to like other countries and other parts of the world is vastly different. Our culture here is more of a driving culture.
And things are a lot more spread out getting into the Midwest part of the country as well. So
Right. So like, and we do really long road trips.
Right.
You know, we want to be able to like stash all of our camping gear and our bikes and, you know, all these different things into our vehicles, which requires us to have more space in our vehicles.
Right.
So as our lifestyles have been changing and like what we need our vehicles to do, they've responded by having, you know, larger vehicles for us.
Right.
And then the other thing that I think has also impacted it, especially when it comes to families, are child seat requirements. So I would say the fact that, and this is a good thing, you guys know I'm the big safety advocate, but as we've now have federal laws and state laws, right, that require children to be riding in a child seat in the vehicle, now you need larger vehicles for, especially for families that have like, you know, more than 2 kids where you need to fit multiple child seats. You're going to need a larger vehicle that can accommodate that. Otherwise, you can't be traveling with your children, right? I mean, when I was growing up, we were a family of 6 and a Honda Civic.
Right.
So like at that time, there were not the same child seat requirements. And do the seatbelt math. Okay. So it's family of 6, Honda Civic, right? And that's how my family went around.
La, 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 la.
Exactly.
I hear
We
what
know
you're
so
saying.
much more now, right? And now the rules are way different.
Yeah.
I think that is a great point because what I was going to say is people have been, you know, camping for generations, and in terms of automotive history, we went from the family car is kind of like the station wagon, and then we morphed into the minivan. That was the big popular family vehicle, and now we are in the SUV phase. Will it change to something else that
They're
maybe
making
we
the
haven't even
pickups
thought
more
about?
family friendly.
Pickup trucks too, but I mean, back when you think about that historic timeline, we didn't have the child safety seats requirements that you talked about. So that's a really great perspective. Before we wrap this up, we do have to talk about driver training because that's part of his question, and that's a fair point in my opinion.
Yeah,
Oh, silence. What the heck? Come on. Help me out here.
I don't know if there's different training though required for driving a sedan versus driving an SUV. A pickup, maybe you need to have a better sense of like your surroundings and like, you know.
Well, I don't think he's saying that. I think he's just, but drivers or better educated. If drivers were better educated and more competent,
Right.
regardless of what type of vehicle, I that's how I read his question.
And he's saying if because people are paying less attention and they're less competent, that you in response feel that you need to get a bigger vehicle that's safer and whatever, right?
Right.
To give you that, really, it's a false sense of security, right? That if I'm in a bigger car,
sense of self-preservation,
I'm safer, not really caring about what that means for anybody else on the road.
Exactly, and that's a problem. And I do agree that that's not really a great trend. And but I don't know. I'm all for lighter weight, less materials, better fuel economy, all these things.
Lower hood heights.
Hood heights, all of these things. But I think what you mentioned was a great point about like just having to fit the lifestyle. I mean, cars are also super expensive, so everything has to now do everything because a lot of people are just going to be able to get into one car.
Yeah.
So if that means now it has to have all-wheel drive and more space and be a little taller, easier to get in and out of, then I think it might not be great for Mark to hear this, but I think it's possible that maybe just SUVs are a better fit for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
They're fulfilling how they use a vehicle.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the
and
fact
to
of the
the
matter.
point about even with like the pickups, I think he included those too in his question. they went from primarily being like work trucks, right? They weren't necessarily the truck that you were using with your family. Now, like the F-150s that we have, you can easily install child seats in there. There's plenty of space in that back seat. And you still have a decent sized bed to be able to like haul your stuff and do whatever you need to do, right? So like these vehicles are being designed to meet the myriad of needs that we have and that we want.
Right.
So I think it's really more that our culture is changing and the OEMs have responded in turn, right? They're giving us what we're asking for.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, the Ford Fusion was a really nice sedan. The last Chevrolet Impala was a really nice sedan. And I was sad when they were discontinued. But Ford and General Motors, like, people are not buying them. They're not selling that well. So we need to look at what people are buying, what we think they're going to be buying in the future. And as you know, working in industry, you're always thinking, 5 years ahead. What do you think people are going to be wanting to buy? And that's those are the decisions that people make.
Well, and in the context of the episode today, let's not forget that there are actually still a lot of sedans and things out there. We're talking about one right now.
Yes. You want one, Mark? There's the Honda Accord.
Yes. No, I'm very grateful that that's really why I try to introduce this car in a very gracious way, because I'm really glad that we still have the Accord.
Certainly.
Well, that'll about do it for this episode, which was produced by Dave Abrams and edited by Andrew Belize and Anatoly Shumsky. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we discussed. Just a reminder, please keep your questions coming to talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.